Hello, everyone. I believe we are live. So we will kick off the Q&A Ask Me Anything with Preston Lewis. I'm Grace McClure. I'll be moderating this session. And as soon as you drop a question, please upvote everyone else's questions and we will get to those with the highest number of upvotes first. But to kick off the session, we had a couple of questions come in early. So Preston, I would love to hear from you. What is one thing we can do to keep the human in human-centric approach?
Well, this word keeps coming up, and it's such good news that we're talking about it. As communicators, it's so important for us all to remember who we're working with. We're in the business of communicating with human beings, and frankly, I think it's a luxury that many of us tend to forget that we have. Every day, I feel very grateful that this is the kind of work that we do. Thank you for the question. What a great place to start. Considering the point I was just making about remembering what business that we're in and we're constantly working with human beings, I think that, this is coming from someone, by the way, who spends, it feels like most of my time talking about technology these days and how communications technology specifically can impact and facilitate a more modern human and modern overall employee experience. But one thing we can do to keep the human and human-centric is to remember that a big part of our job as communicators is to constantly surface the concerns, those things that are keeping people up at night, particularly employees in our organization, surface those concerns so that everyone, especially people managers and leaders, are completely understand what's keeping people up at night, or in other words, completely are positioned to be empathetic in everything that leaders and people managers do. That when they start conversations, when we start conversations, we're able to pay attention to those other things, that left-hand column, I like to say, those things that we're thinking about but may not be saying, so that, like I think the previous session did a great job touching on, and I want to circle back to some of their comments, and so great. Until we address the concerns, those things that keep people up at night, no one is ever going to listen to anything that we're saying. We're missing a big opportunity to build and sustain levels of trust in our organization. So I think that's the best answer I have. Is our job is, as facilitators, as communicators, same thing as far as I'm concerned, is to constantly surface today, what is keeping people up at night, and beyond people, more specifically, different audiences in our organizations, what are keeping them up at night, and make sure that those people managers and leaders are aware of what they can do to respond to that.
Great. I loved the left-handed column. I think that was such a good visual to illustrate what you were saying there. So love that. This is our top voted question of the now. So
all right.
Thank you, Hadley, for submitting this, and feel free, everyone else, to drop your questions. But how do you see the relationship between HR and comms? Where is the overlap, and where should they remain separate? Great question.
Okay. Oh, I love this one. Thank you, Hadley. Well, to answer the question, I'll give you the short answer first, and maybe we can expand it a little bit more. But I think that there are three primary, obvious functions that have a shared responsibility for the experience that people have at work every day. And so the relationship between HR and comms, it's hard to say should be, right? Who am I to say this? But often could be really rising above their function as HR or as comms, and pay more attention to every touch point and moment that exists in someone's workday. So short answer is the relationship is they both have shared ownership for the employee experience. I did say three. I think the third function is IT. Nothing's worse than showing up at work every day and not having the technology and the tools, or the access, as we often like to define it, to do our best work as human beings, as people. And it just doesn't feel good. So, to me, those are the three most obvious. There are others, but most obvious functions that have a shared responsibility for focusing on the experience that people have in an organization. Where do they overlap? Well, the question, the part of the answer within that is when we think about the behaviors and reinforcing the behaviors and providing opportunities for behavior change to happen, I often feel that HR is in a really great position to support, growing and shifting and changing of behaviors to align with the needs of modern work. Communicators, as I said earlier, kind of gave away the punchline. We are facilitators. We don't just make this stuff up, as I always like to say. It's our responsibility to build a context for a two-way conversation, build a foundation inclusive of technology and other offline methods to make sure that we understand what questions people may have, and then we provide access or opportunity for those to learn and to develop and to understand what we need to do on an individual level to align with the type of change that we know is constant in our work. Where should they remain separate? That's a tough one. Maybe we can move on because I don't, it's hard. Hopefully it's in their job descriptions, their responsibilities and so on. But I think that's something that also is maybe distinct for different companies and industries and organizations.
Yeah, I think that I love the communicators are facilitators. I think we need to get those t-shirts made. But this is a good fast follow to elaborate on the question previous. So what are some of the tactics you'd recommend in that working relationship to help employees stay engaged? And thank you for this question, Rachel.
Yes, thank you. Let's get right into it, because those who, by the way, so many friends in the audience and on the speaker panel. I mean, it's like, thank you again to ContactMonkey to be invited into this conversation today. Just want to make sure that was really clear. To that point, those who I've met before, who I've had an opportunity to work with or think with, know that I really do like to get tactical. It's like, strategy is only as good as the implementation, or, let's move beyond talk. So thank you for this question, Rachel. What are some of the specific tactics? I touched on the piece of constantly listen and make sure that people managers and leaders have the answers prepared for the questions we know are keeping people up at night. That's one. One of my favorite tactics, just to kind of give away a really, frankly, it's one of those low cost, high impact ideas that we were talking about a little bit earlier today, Grace. The concept of leadership branding. So not just leaders, but all of us human beings love to talk about ourselves. We love to. So considering that, we love to look good, as I like to say, but that's a whole other conversation. One of the things that I'd recommend that communicators could do to increase to develop to support leaders in developing a better relationship with their people and their organizations is this tactic called the leadership branding. So let's keep it real simple. Imagine if you were to, as a communicator, invite either a new leader, a leader in any part of the organization, a leader that has been there forever, and you structure a conversation saying, we're going to talk about your leadership brand. And the output of that conversation is a strategy on one side and a plan on the back. And in that leadership brand conversation, we ask questions like, let's look at our values, for example. That's where I like to start. Within all of these values, which ones matter most to you and why? It's not that the others don't, but really, which ones do? Okay, what great stories might you have in the back of your mind to help reinforce why that value matters so much to you? How do you like to communicate? How do you what do you not want to do, or how do you not like to communicate? So we make sure, we don't ask them to do anything that they're really never going to do. And those expectations are clear. One of my other favorite questions as part of the exercise is, when you leave here, whether it's 2 years or 25 years, what do you want people to be saying about you? What do you want your legacy to be? There's a few other questions we don't have time to get into, but what that does is it really enables us as communicators to be very clear on how we can partner and support with our leadership team and our individuals to be more engaged in the business and be better positioned for deeper relationships with people on their team or the whole organization. By the way, the backside is the more tactical side. So, here's what we have of our channels and tactics and opportunities to communicate. Let's make some commitments together on how we can continue to partner and what, 3 to 5 things you might want to explore or pilot that you haven't done before. And of the things you're doing today, what's really effective? And, as a communicator, how can we support you and even being better at those things you're already doing? So that's one of my favorite kind of tactical ideas to give away in terms of that leadership brand exercise.
Great. Thank you, Preston. There was so much there. I'm sure that we can all pull
This
out.
is fun. This is fun. Let's keep them going.
Yeah, this is great. This one has 7 upvotes, so it's our top outvoted question yet. So this is, what are some of the measurements you recommend that someone working in employee experience should focus on to demonstrate its importance to the bottom line in an organization? Great question.
Okay. All right, I'm going to have to unpack this one a little bit because the working in employee experience is the place to start, right? So, what we know to be true is we need to define what employee experience means to our organization, right? It's hard for me to see the organization that Christine works for because it's got to cut off Gannett. But first define scope, role and responsibility. What do you, Christine, and or team, what are you able to influence? What expectations does your organization have of you in influencing the experience? How are we defining the experience? So once we do that, then we can dive a little bit deeper into 2 things. Number one, what is the business strategy? The reason why I say that is because only then can we directly connect. Once we have a clear sense of the business strategy, and once we've identified where we can influence and help support the success of that strategy, we always know we need to do that as comms teams and functions, right? We really need to make sure that our overall communication strategy or EX strategy is directly in line with the business strategy. When we find those opportunities or areas that we can influence, we want to make sure we're really proactive, right? Because that's connected to our value. Then we can dive within each of those specific elements, those areas that we can influence, bottom line, business strategy, and start measuring 2 things, 2 levels, I should say. Macro measures. So those are those very HR-y business metrics: engagement, retention, attraction, time to value, speed to value. Some of those things that, we don't have direct responsibility for as EX leaders or communicators, but we do want to call out that we do have shared responsibility. We do want to partner with our other team members and measure those things. Then we have the micro metrics, those very channel specific metrics that may be connected to some of the obvious ones like email, opens, reads, team interaction, engagement. You can move through all the different micro measures connected to digital comms channels, offline channels. We have event participation and some of those other things. But that would be how I would approach, this type of question. And then obviously make sure that it's structured in that dashboard for measurement, if you will, is structured in a way so that those that we know we need to partner with can see their success in our success and how it ultimately impacts way beyond comms, but the EX and the overall business strategy.
Yeah, I think that's a great tactic. So to be able to show interdepartmentally how some of these partnership initiatives are taking off, I think that is excellent for buy-in. So good idea there.
The other piece I'll just say, there's the own versus influence, right? In terms of measures. There are some that we have more ownership over, and it's important to be clear about that. Some we can just influence, and it's also important to be clear about that.
Excellent. And then this one, 10 upvotes. So what high value or low resource tactics most effectively keep people engaged at work?
I'll start with, again, some of this I say obvious, but some of it's not that obvious. The first is listening. Listening is really inexpensive and very, very valuable. So when we think about listening tactics, let's call out the obvious ones. Digital surveys, pulse questions, some that are not as low cost, but things like focus groups, others like interviews. So, one of the things I like to say in the context of listening strategy as communicators is it's constant. It needs to be defined. How often each of those tactics are employed needs to be very clear to everyone in an organization. So that's the first part. But, we know also that asking good questions and listening to an organization is only as good as the job we do playing back what we heard. And so making sure that beyond asking good questions and crafting a pulse question and putting it at the bottom of an email newsletter or on an intranet page or moving it into a series of different teams, groups, or channels, or I could Slack and keep going. We also need to have our plan for very, very quickly, i.e. same day or within minutes, not months. We're playing back, here are the things we heard. What we also know to be true about human beings is, being heard, just like in any good relationship, is one of the most important things. And so I always talk about listening as one of the biggest missed opportunities that communicators could and should consider doing more often. Not just communicators, but organizations, frankly. So that's one in the context of low resource, high value. There are a handful of others in the context of storytelling or, people, leader, and manager engagement. But I'll stop there because I know we have some other things coming up. And please, Grace, considering the time that we have and the other questions are coming through, feel free to tell me if I can spend more time on them or if we jump into something else.
No, I think that was a great answer as well. And
Okay.
I would love for us to get as many as possible. So I will share our next most upvoted question, which is, we are working to be transparent with our employees, but sometimes the why behind decisions has to do with complicated business reasons that don't always resonate with them. How do you recommend balancing transparency with what employees care about? Oof, this is a toughie. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, this could be an hour just on this question, but I'll try to get right into the construct or framework that I would suggest when thinking about this question. We got this simple framework, very, very simple, right? That's why it's powerful and valuable. This narrative framework, right? So a narrative, right? It's a collection of stories that exist consciously or unconsciously throughout any organization. Five parts: context, future state, current state, pathways, calls to action. The piece that's most relevant to this question is what we often don't do a good enough job of, and I say we, like communicators inside any organization, is being really clear about why some of these decisions are happening. And in the context phase, we can do that. The future state, we kind of build a sense of excitement, put that flagpole on vision state. But that middle part around current state is where the magic happens around transparency, because that's when we can be really honest with some of the bigger influencers that are contributing to why decisions are being made. We don't often have to talk about them specifically. I know people want us to, but what I find to be most productive, in a conversation where we can't be as transparent as people would like for us to be, is to constantly remind everyone of, the other things that are happening in our industry or in our organization or company that are a little bit beyond our control, frankly. And, inviting people into an adult conversation around being honest around those things that are really, really difficult, so that together, hopefully we can find some common ground. I hope that answers the question. If anything, I hope that, is a helpful framework. By the way, if anybody's interested in more about this or any of those other things I touched on, I'm definitely one of those people. I'm happy to just jump on a call and elaborate much, much further and share the framework I'm talking about and give it away, if anybody's interested.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I hope that everyone reaches out if we don't get to your questions. I think we have time for one more, so I will go with the one with the most upvotes, which is, what is the best method of communicating with hourly employees?
Okay. I'll try to give a short answer. So hourly employees, we know that the most effective method is by far empowering their team leaders or people managers to be more effective communicators. So if we can just be clear about that and like put that aside, because I know that's a difficult thing to do, the next place that we typically go is meet people where they're at. I'm not going to assume that because you're hourly, it means you're mobile first. Having said that, we know that there are better, faster, cheaper ways to communicate on mobile devices as a digital channel. So, we're much smarter about that in 2024 than ever before. But, there's also that balance of, gee, what we can do, say, on a mobile app versus the offline experiential element, which tends to be, frankly, much more valuable and impactful. So, as I always say, never forget that sometimes it's the most basic things, the most basic tactics that we can do to enable hourly teams of people to communicate effectively, or for offline or hourly employees to get the answers to the questions they need from their people managers. And if we're going to do one thing, we need to make sure that we're empowering and enabling the people that manage hourly workers with the right answers to questions ahead of time, with the right information and in the right kind of opportunities to share with people, hourly or not, in their organizations, so that they could take full advantage of working somewhere.
Well, thank you, Preston. I hope that everybody got as much out of this session as I did. I think I can rewatch the recording and pick up even more things. So thank you so much for joining us, Preston. And thank you so much for those who participated and dropped your chats. Sorry we couldn't get to everyone's, but enjoy the next session.
Thanks for inviting me.
Bye, everyone.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Christina, what do you think about that Ask Me Anything with Preston, Lewis, and Grace?
I love Ask Me Anything. I love it when you get the chance to actually engage, ask your real questions. So I'm always down for a good Ask Me Anything.
Sounds good. And speaking of Ask Me questions and wanting your feedback, feel free to leave your responses in a poll. We'd love to see what you think about that particular session. And speaking of sessions, we also do have a networking session for you. So you'll be redirected automatically to our fluid space for networking. Remember, the more you engage, you higher your leaderboard points, because we're giving away some prizes today, Christina. Did you know that? Did you know that?
This one I did know.
Okay, great, because I know you didn't know about the mugs.
Yeah, that's right. As you enter the fluid space, you'll hear from our organizer, who will explain exactly how the virtual space works.
So we look forward to that, and then there's